Good morning, everyone. This is Matt Sexton with the Florida Department of Transportation's Production Support Office. Welcome to the 8th part of our series, Getting Started with FDOT Connect for OpenRoads Designer. Today we're going to discuss automated quantities for OpenRoads Designer using FDOT Connect. We also will be going very briefly over the traffic plans tools. There's a lot to say about the traffic plans tools, and so we're going to save that for its own webinar where we'll cover the entirety of the traffic plans tools. That'll be Randy Roberts will be presenting that in a future webinar, which you will of course get a notification about. But today we'd like to talk about automated quantities. And we have been developing for automated quantities because that is of course an important part of this whole workflow. There are some limitations that we've run into because to some degree the automated quantities tools in OpenRoads Designer are still a Bentley tech preview or something to that effect. So we are going to show you today what we have come up with so far. But to be honest, we are just not quite there yet with automated quantities, but we plan on being as soon as the technology is available from Bentley. But we're going to be going over that. If you have questions, there is a question and answer dialogue that is part of your GoToWebinar dialogue. You can enter your questions in that dialogue. We will be answering those in real time or alternatively at some point towards the end of the webinar. If we don't get an opportunity to answer your question during this webinar, we will be compiling the questions and answers into a question and answer document that we will post along with a recording of this webinar in the posted webinars section of our website. So if you're wondering where these webinars are, you can view the recordings of parts 1 through 7 on our website. There's a section entitled Posted Webinars, and look for the FDOT Connect Getting Started series. That has its own link that'll take you to a page listing parts 1 through 7 of Getting Started with FDOT Connect for OpenRoads Designer. This recording for this webinar will be posted within about a week, along with that question and answer dialogue, question and answer document from the question and answer dialogue, and the PowerPoint presentation that Kandi is going to present. So without anything else to say, I'll go ahead and turn things over to Kandi Daffin. She's going to talk to you about what we have developed so far for automated quantities for OpenRoads Designer in FDOT Connect.
Thanks, Matt. As you can tell, we're still getting everything in place for automated quantities. What I'm going to talk to you today is about what we have done so far, where we're headed, and what the intentions are going forward with OpenRoads Designer and automated quantities. Let's see. What we have available right now, what's delivered is the current FDOT Connect version. What tools are in there now are Link Data Manager. Everyone that's worked in SS4 is familiar with that. In Connect, we only have the manual templates available to you. And right now you can manually get the quantities off of your elements, off of your shapes, and add them to the manual templates by hand. We're hoping that no one will get to the quantities stage of their projects, their active projects, before we get these tools completed and delivered. Of course, we will be happy to help as much as we can if you have an active project that gets to that stage before we have the tools available. We are actively working with Bentley to get everything in place, and I'll be discussing that more as we go. Currently, Bentley has Asset Manager, which is a technology preview that allows users to assign item types to elements within your drawings. That's how we're going to be reporting on our quantities, is through those item types. Currently, there are some issues with Asset Manager that we're trying to get worked out with them. But like I said, we'll get more into that as we go on. Just as a note, one reason why Link Data Manager only has the manual templates is ORD, OpenRoads Designer Connect Edition, does not have Design and Computation Manager, and it does not have Quantity Manager. Those are no longer part of that software. So those are the ways that the automated quantities were done in SS4. So without those tools, we're going to have to build a new structure for getting those quantities from our plans or from our model, which is one of the things that we really get into is what we're going to do with the models. What we're going to go over mostly today is we're going to talk about the item types. We're going to look at them when they're placed as part of features and when they're applied with Asset Manager. We're going to look at Asset Manager, and I'll show you how we can attach items with that tool. We'll look at the native MicroStation Reports tool, which is probably what we're going to end up using to generate our raw data for our summary reports. And if we have time, we'll create a summary of quantities file just to show you how to use the LDM to attach one of those templates. Item types are a lot like ad hocs were in SS4. It's basically meta info that you will attach to a MicroStation element. You can use an item type to identify anything on an element. I mean, you can even go so far as to use an item type to include a link to the spec that applies to a certain element. You can apply a link to the APL for an item that is already on the approved products list. They can be used to attach any kind of information you want to an element. For automated quantities, we're going to use these item types to apply pay item quantity information so that we can get our quantities to generate to deliver with our project. Right now, there are a couple of limitations to how we can put item types on elements in OpenRoads Designer. Features, which is ideally the best way to apply these, features will only support one item type per, and I'm sure you're aware that there are some item types that are some elements that are going to have more than one pay item associated with them. So we'll have to find an alternate way to apply an item type for additional pay item information. Currently, we would have to use Asset Manager to apply secondary or additional item types. An element can have as many item types on it as you want. We haven't found a limit to that yet. So if you have a MicroStation element that has several item types on it, it will still support that, and we'll be able to do that. We're having trouble currently getting alignment information for station and offset in the 3D model. With Asset Manager, we can apply station and offset to an item type, and I'll demonstrate that when we get further into the demonstration today. I'll show you how that works. But right now, in the 3D model, Asset Manager is not able to read the station and offset. So that's something we're working with Bentley on to try to make sure that we can get that to work, because ultimately what we want is we want all of our quantities to come from the model, because in the future the model is going to be our deliverable. And we're working towards getting all of our quantities from that 3D model, or as many as possible. Asset Manager, like I said, is used to apply additional item types. And like I said, it can read the 2D station and location, but it's limited in 3D currently. We'll get into Asset Manager a little more when I demonstrate it. Bentley is still working on it, getting that 3D alignment information and a few other things. And the wonderful thing about Asset Manager is that the databases it pulls from are Excel files. They're macro-enabled Excel files, so that makes it easier for us to maintain it and for the users to develop project-specific item types that can be placed on their project. As a caveat, it is still in development. We're still working on it. We're hoping to have some more functionality in the next release from Bentley, release 3, that we're hoping will come out this month. And we'll work on that, developing further with what tools we have available through that as soon as we get that available to us. Now, once we have those item types applied to our elements in Connect, then how are we going to get that back out and generate our summaries? Right now, we were looking at possibility of using several report style sheets. It's looking like the native microstation reports tool is going to be the route we end up taking. I've got a couple of those developed as tests, and they seem to work well. Our developers here in the office are working on a tool that's going to take these raw report data, and it'll either transform it into an LDM template so that you can just attach that LDM template and create your sheets the way you did before in SS4. And that would only be for traditional plan sets. In the future, as we move towards next generation plan sets where we have a model focused deliverable, and we would be eliminating the delivery of sheets and plans. In the future, we will have that tool developed to where it will take all those raw reports and combine it into a bookmarked PDF summary of quantities report. We're working on the name of it. It is not a comp book. It is a complete summary of quantities report for all of the quantities on the project. The same information that you would normally see in your summary of quantities in the plan set, but it will all be delivered in a bookmarked PDF. Okay, now I've got my splash screen here for my contact information, but what I'd like to do now is to jump out into OpenRoads Designer Connect Edition and show you some of the things that we've been working on and how we expect everything to work. Just as a disclaimer, this is still under development. Things may evolve, they may change, and I'm hoping to touch on a few things that we found recently. Most of the stuff I'm going over today is the same thing I showed at the Florida Local Users Group. So if you were there, you saw that presentation. This is pretty much the same thing I went over there, but we are developing and finding more things as we go, and hopefully we'll make a better tool. What I've got is I've opened a file where I created a corridor. Now, as I said previously, you can attach an item type with features. So what I've done is I've gone into the features DGN library, and I have attached item types to those features. Let's see here. Okay, so in the features DGN lib, it takes a second to open this up. Oh no. There it went. Okay, good. All right, so now we can look at the features. In the features, I'm trying to focus on doing most of these in the 3D. For our application today, I wanted to show, say in curb, I've pulled this out. This curb has an item type, curb and gutter, attached to that. So when this feature is placed, it's going to have that item type. Now, when I ran this corridor, let me see if I can find curb. Here we go. Let me see if I can select the mesh. There. Okay, so when I did it, it's got that curb and gutter item type. Here's your item type. It's got all this information attached to it. And the way I've tried to set these up to help you guys out is that it has a type. It should have a pull down here because we're still having a little bit of quirks when I set these and applied these. It did not bring everything forward. So to fix that, what I need to do is to come into my drawing and we'll look at the item types bar there in the drawing and the attach. Here in the item types tools, I'm going to use this little flyout to open the dialog. This item types dialog, you'll see that there's only just a few in here. But what we want to do is, you can see as I hover over it, it says local resource differs from library. If I click on that, it ungrades these options here and I can update from library. And when I do that, it's going to bring all of these from the DGN Lib into this drawing, make them available, and update them. So now I've got this, I can hover over it. Now it says the local resource matches the library, which is good. So now when I come over here and I select, if I can select the curb and gutter, now when I click on the field beside type, it has a pull down. So you don't even have to know at this point which pay item to apply. You can use the pull down and select the appropriate type of curb and gutter. Now, knowing that when this was placed with a feature, we already know the feature says it's type F. Well, the item type doesn't know it's type F, so we have to tell it it's type F, and then it looks up the pay item and the description, units of measure, and it applies all of that. So all you have to know is which type, and the lookup table that we'll be delivering should have all that information for you. That is my goal, is to make it that simple. Now, you can apply these as a selection set. You can apply the type of concrete you like here. If it's traffic B, it applies the pay item and the description. And it has fields in here where you can type in design notes and it will stay with that element you have selected. Okay, now I wanted to demonstrate how easy it is to do that. I'm going to open a different file and we're going to look at a file that's already got a lot of elements in it. I'll probably have to reattach that DGN Lib, the features DGN Lib item types, but it'll go fairly quickly, and I'll show you how simple it is. That is our goal, is to make it to where these can be set as a group. When you run your corridor, you can just, I'm even going to close out this view and show the 3D view more, because in this drawing, this section of the corridor has been updated with all of those item types. To make it easier on us, I'm going to, let's turn off our references just so that we don't have that cluttering it up for us. So now you see it's just the 3D meshes and line work. So what I'm going to do is to isolate these. We can turn off our linear because we're going to be working with the meshes. And we can turn off all these meshes and we'll turn them back on one at a time. So if I select curb, you can see that, and all these little spots in here are just little artifacts. They're not really there. They just, it's one of the display issues. I know that this is type F and this is type F, and these on the inside are type E. So I can just create a selection set of the ones that I know are type F. You can double check here from the feature and we can set them. There we go. I caught myself. It does not have the updated. So real quick, we can come back to our item types and update from library. And now it should be, when I select those, okay, my properties didn't want to update. There we go. Now I have these selected. I should be able to use the pull down and set those are type F. And those you can see are type E. And they're set. I can turn off the curb and we'll come back and select, oh, let's do the pavement base. We know all of this pavement base is going to be the same. And we know that we have them all selected. And we know it's type 6. And that quick, we have all of our pay items set for our base group. We can turn that back off. And we can set our slopes. And we know that our unpaved shoulders and slopes are all going to be sod. Now this is where it becomes interesting because that's one thing we're going to have to work out for areas that are either performance turf or performance turf sod. You'll have to break these shapes up, or we'll have to find a way to differentiate between the pay items. If it's just as simple as selecting one shape as one pay item and one shape as another, that's one thing. But if, say, in this area, this shape needs to be broken up, we're going to have to look at a viable way to do that so that it doesn't, hopefully doesn't make more work for you guys. There's a little section that got missed. So now we've got all of that selected. We can set that as performance turf sod. It applies the pay item and the units of measure, and it's all set. This is how simple these are. I'm going to go ahead and set all of these really quick. One thing I wanted to point out, if you can see when I select this, it selects all this as one element. We're going to have to find, we're going to have to see if we can do a named boundary or we're working with Bentley to find out why this isn't separating these two elements. It's all part of the corridor, so I think that's part of the reason. So we're looking at how to break this up so that you can have a begin end station and another begin end station for these guys. So we know that that is the type 1, and we can set that. And the pavement, let's make sure I turn off the traffic separator so that I don't apply anything I don't want. And I think that's got all that. So now that I have all of these applied, we can select any one element in here and see that it's got the correct pay item assigned. Now, we've got the base pay item, but I'm sure you noticed that there's nothing in here about the stationing. Station and offset isn't showing here because I didn't assign those with the feature, because the asset manager tool is what's going to determine those. Let's turn back on our alignment reference so that you can see the alignment there. And for this, I'm going to demonstrate, I'm going to reattach the alignment with 2D. And you'll see it comes in down there, just so that I can actually select it with Asset Manager. That's one of the things that we're working on with them. I just want to be able to demonstrate for you guys what it does. So to apply a location for station and offset, what I'm going to do is I'm going to, let's see, I'm going to go back to my OpenRoads modeling workflow, and you'll see here on the Home tab, they have Asset Manager available to us. Now, I have set up a simple Asset Manager with, and you have to navigate to the OpenRoads installation to find this, and I wish it would automatically go there, but it doesn't. And if you had a project specific, that would be great because it would go straight to your project. So we're going to look in our Organization Civil FDOT, and there's an Asset Manager folder here that's going to have your templates or your databases in there. I've set this one up, FDOT locations, to, and real quick, let me just pop that open, just so that you can see the spreadsheet and what it looks like. This is the Asset Manager database. This is how we define an item type outside of the native OpenRoads Designer Connect tools. And this can be applied through Asset Manager. For this one, it's very simple. I just have the start and end station. This code here, we're trying to get all of these codes from Bentley so that we know exactly how to do that. With the next release, they're supposed to have a validator in their tool that will make sure that when you start typing in these formulas and such, that it will only allow you to put in the correct syntax for that. This particular one I have set up to find start and end station and side, and I've currently only got it set to identify the element type mesh. You can set these to identify based on level, color, line weight, line style. Any of these over here you can use to define what elements it will actually put this item type on. Right now, this one will only go on mesh, although in the future, I'll probably have it set up to work as well on lines for linear features, and we'll see what's required as we progress with setting all this up as far as what's available. So now we've taken a look at what that is. I'll show you how to actually apply one with Asset Manager. So we've selected the spreadsheet we want to apply with. We're going to check that because that's the only one currently in that database. For the linear reference, that is where we're going to select our alignment. Because the 3D isn't working, I've got the 2D attached currently. Let me see if it'll let me. Yes, it did select that alignment. And now I want to do this as a selection set. And I want to point out that we can select everything because this is a generic set of station offset information. It doesn't matter any of the other item types that are on any of these elements. It can be pavement, it can be curb and gutter, it can be base, it can be any of those things, and we can still apply this location asset on top of that by using Asset Manager. So we'll come in here and we'll add the assets. And of course, all this varies. We can close this out. Let it clear out the properties. And then now we can select any mesh element in here. And you can see it did apply the location item type, but because we are in a 3D model, it's not picking up the station and offset information. Once we get that worked out with Bentley and they get the tools in place, we will be able to report station and offset, and all that information will be there. Okay, so right now that is the process that we're looking at for applying the item types to elements. I'm going to have a lot of questions, I'm sure, from especially the districts, wondering, I have a 3R project and I don't have a survey and I don't have a 3D model. How am I going to get my quantities? Well, the CAD office right now, our direction is to get 3D quantities. For those instances, we are going to make tools available to you so that you can create a QTD-SR file as you did in the past, and we may still need QTD-SRDs for some items with the 3D quantities as well. But we'll have it so that you can create those shape files and apply item types to plan elements and still report that. That's not going to be our preferred workflow. It's not going to be necessarily completely set up to deliver right off the bat. We may originally deliver a blank asset manager template for you guys to set up 2D plan item types if you have to do quantities in 2D plans. But ultimately, our goal as a department is to work towards a 3D model deliverable on our projects. So the first thing that we're going to work on is these 3D quantities. And we will try to put tools in place for anyone that has, say, a 3R project or has a need to get quantities from a plan quantity rather than a model quantity. So that going forward, just so that you know, that's how things are working. Wanted to also show, now that we have these pay items defined, that report that I was talking about. We'll come back to the drawing workflow and the analyze tool. Another thing that I'm hoping that we'll get as we develop this more from the OpenRoads modeling from the FDOT bar, I'm hoping to add, that's not what I wanted. I'm hoping to add one more little tool section here that has quantities that will have asset manager and the reports and any other tool that you might need to generate your quantities as its own little section here, just as a convenience for you guys. And it's, you know, that's coming. So for now, to get to the reports, we go to the drawing workflow and the Analyze tab and see the native MicroStation reports here. These are some that I've built and defined just for demonstration purposes for now. You can see that they're set up with columns and everything. But if you click on any one of these, you can preview the summary and it's going to read everything in the active file. You can see right there, it's looking to search in the active file. And we can do a preview just so that you can see all of the curb and gutter information. It does assign the element ID, which is the same thing as the area ID previously in SS4. And the units of measure. It's not giving me quantities yet. That's something I'm working on programming in. So getting that syntax from Bentley to get those formulas so that they'll work with the item types. That's something we're working with them on to get those formulas so that we can get that, that quantity information as part of our summary tables. Aside from the preview, we can also export the results as an Excel. We'll do that. We'll export these and we'll define whether that goes in the calculations folder. I'm thinking that's where they're going to end up. So that, and they'll all go in the same place. So that tool that our developers are working on to compile these either into LDM templates or that combined PDF will have all of those raw Excels that we generate from this reports tool. And then our FDOT tool will take that and process it and and put it in the deliverable format that we have defined for the project that you're working on, whether it's a traditional plan set or a next gen plan set that is more model centric and less sheets. that's where that's going. I'm going to try to take a quick peek at whether we have any questions. How do we deal with lift, and how do we figure that in? We'll either add a line here to where you can either enter that value in, or it will read it from the 3D mesh and get that volume quantity and actually read it from your model. Ideally, we would love for it to just pull that information straight off the model. But keep in mind, if that is the direction we go with it, that the model will have to be accurate. So you'll have to make sure that your templates and your corridors are created such that your asphalt thickness reflects the actual conditions that you hope to achieve, so that your quantities will come out correctly. MOT quantities. MOT quantities may be similar to the 3R type quantities. We may have to get those as 2D, and it may be something that goes in the QTD SRD. We're going to look at that as we go. As I get more of these pay items programmed in, these things are going to come up as to how we're going to include them. And if it's something that is just not feasible to come from the model, then we'll have to look at alternative ways of getting that, as in having a shapefile in a QTD SRD so that we can define areas and apply an item type to that. Ultimately, we want to have as many of these defined in the model as possible, so that in the future, when we deliver our model to the reviewers and to the contractor, they can just click on any element in the model and it will tell them the pay item information. If we have that information in a separate file with 2D plan quantities, that defeats the purpose of delivering a model. So that's why we're trying to get as much as we possibly can in the model. But obviously there are going to be some instances where that's not possible. So that's what we're going to be looking at as we develop further, as what we can do. Where to put the information we used to type in the attributes, I think I covered that. With the design notes and everything, you can type in anything there and it will stay with the element. Or if you do a selection set of everything that you know applies to that note, you can apply it there. We'll only be adding those lines in the item type that are applicable to, for these item types, we're only going to be adding the lines that are applicable to your summary sheet. So if you need to attach other information, you would have to create your own item types. And that is one thing that we're going to try to do as we get this delivered to you guys, is to have a template for Asset Manager set up, so, and hopefully have good directions and instructions to go along with it, so that you can create your own item types and apply them as necessary. As long as you don't go overboard putting too much stuff on there and bogging down your processing time. That's another thing we're testing. We want to see if we have all of these item types applied. We want to make absolutely sure it's not going to slow your processing time. So that's something to keep in mind when you're applying item types. You don't want to go crazy with them so that you slow your processing time down. Will the asphalt quantities have a feature label to adjust thickness, or does the template have to be corrected? That goes back to the fact that we want the model to be as accurate as possible. So I would say ideally we would correct the template. And that's something, like I said, we're looking at as we develop this, as to whether or not we're going to have another line where you just type in the thickness, or whether we rely directly on the model to have that thickness correct. Okay, seeing a question about how we're going to QC that. Yeah, we are relying on the model to be correct, and that's ultimately what we're going to, the reviewers are going to have to be familiar with being able to open a model and find an element that they want to check and click on that element and review it in 3D. That's the future of the tool. That's where we're going. We want the model to be the deliverable. That's the direction we're heading. So yes, our reviewers are going to have to be fluent in 3D, and so are our contractors. But that's and it's where we're going, and we're also relying on our designers to model correctly. So it's going to be even more important to get those thicknesses correct when you define your templates, when you define your corridors. And we've got to check ourselves first and then have our reviewers check behind us. Stabilization quantities that will not appear in the 3D model. That's something, I don't know, as far as stabilization, if it's not going to be in the 3D model, it may go in a QTD SRD shapefile, even as a 3D model in there if you want to draw it. If it's something that you would calculate by hand, we probably will have a raw Excel report that can be incorporated in the tool to be processed and added to our summary. That's something we'll be looking at, how to handle those things. There's a couple of different ways we can handle it, but as we go through, and like I said, as I go through all of the applicable pay items and program them in, these things are going to come up as I look at each pay item individually, how we put this in the plans. It's going to come up, and we're going to find the best way to do it. And we will be developing training as this gets completed. When we deliver it, I'll be rewriting the Automated Quantities Handbook, and we'll deliver training on how to handle each option. Real quick, I'm going to let my associates work on handling any more of these questions they can. I want to touch on, I know that we didn't get into any of the traffic plan stuff. I want to give Matt a few minutes to talk about those tools before we wrap up today. But just as a quick touch on that information, I know the signing and marking tools that are in development are also applying item types as the signs and pavement markings are being placed. So we'll also have reports that will pull that information from that. So if you're placing your signing and pavement marking with the tools, then those item types will already be on there for you. So that'll be a case of once you get all your plan done, with those, you'll just generate your report and it will be there. One of the things that we've run into as far as signing and pavement marking, and for traditional plan sets where that information is quantified by sheet, we've got an issue reported with Bentley now that when you try to do quantities by named boundary, it breaks up your corridor and it cuts it. And when it does that, it drops all those item types and loses them. Bentley is aware of it. We've reported it, and we're going to be working on trying to find a solution for that so that it will be as simple as doing a quantity by named boundary. It will break those up and it will give you your quantities by sheet if that's what we have to do. More importantly, if you have multiple alignments along your project, we'll need to be able to do that quantity by named boundary so that we can define which areas within the model are associated with which alignment, so that we can assign a boundary for all of the quantities within this boundary go with this alignment, so that we can break those up appropriately. And short of going in and showing you guys how to attach an LDM template, which I'm sure if anybody's worked in SS4, they probably already know, I'll go ahead and wrap up my portion for now and give Matt just a few minutes to talk about the traffic tools and what's available, if that's okay.
All righty, thank you so much for that. So I'm going to go ahead and make myself the presenter. And unfortunately, I don't have a picture of my cat to show you today, so I apologize for that. I know that's been a running gag so far, and today I do not have that for you. Want to go over the traffic plans tools just very briefly to make you familiar with where they are, what they look like, and what they do. Like I said at the very beginning of the webinar, the traffic plans tools, there's a lot to say about them. They are a rather robust set of tools even now, and it's going to take Randy at least an hour to do a good solid presentation to go over the traffic plans tools with you. So we will go ahead and schedule that. It'll be inevitably the webinar after the next webinar. But we have two traffic plans tools right now. We have the pavement marking tool. It's located on the FDOT ribbon, right about in the middle of the ribbon. The pavement marking tool both looks and works very similar to the way the pavement marking tool worked in SS4 and DNC Manager, except it's by itself. It's its own tool. You do have settings for striping, separation, and chevron diverge and merge. You have options for selecting your item type from a list, which you can get from the FDOTConnect software. Okay, and drawing stripes, you can do it by element or any other number of ways. It's going to take a long time to go over the pavement marking tool, but if you're familiar again with the original DNC Manager pavement marking tool, it's actually pretty darn intuitive. I read through a little instruction manual that Randy wrote and was actually really surprised at how quickly I was able to figure it out. So it's not too complicated. The other one we have is the FDOT sign tool. This is almost identical to the FDOT sign tool that is in our Civil 3D State Kit. You can create a new assembly. You place it by post. That's where the information goes. It'll place the sign along with it. It'll give you a preview. You can place it on an alignment. It'll automatically label it to give you your station offset and label the sign number for you. And you can export those sign assemblies, which are all associated. You can export them as an XML. So say you have a sign assembly that's going to appear several times on your project. You can export that to an XML settings file, which will then allow you to place it a second time. You can place it by itself, or you can place it, again, like I said, along an alignment, and it does give you a preview. If I were to create a new sign, allows you to pick a justification of the structure, panel and post. Then this is where you select your settings for your first panel. You can select where relative to the other panels these panels are going to be. You might recognize all of these settings from the MUTCD and other sign cell libraries. Those are all available to you, and you will get previews of those panels as you go through it. I'm not going to go ahead and demonstrate this because, again, jumping in, what information am I going to give you that's going to be useful for you today if I can't give you all the information? So Randy will be scheduling a webinar on these tools, but do be aware of them. They do exist. They are on the FDOT ribbon in FDOT Connect, the FDOT sign tool, and the pavement marking tool. They're actually pretty intuitive, so go ahead and jump in there and try to work with those, but we will go ahead and get you that information soon. So if you have any questions about this webinar so far, feel free to go ahead and type those in. I know we got just a few more minutes left before we call it a day. We will be posting this webinar. I'll show you where we're posting this webinar. Go to fdot.gov/CADD, CADD. That is the CAD office website. Go to our CAD posted webinars. right under the most requested section. This does not take you to the list of webinars just yet. Look for the FDOT Connect OpenRoads Designer webinars and then Getting Started. Once you click that, you're at the Getting Started list. You can see parts 1 through 7, like I mentioned at the very beginning of this webinar, are available for you to view, along with most of them have presentations and all of them have a compilation of the Q&A. Alrighty, so we've got a couple more minutes. Go ahead and type those questions in. We will be compiling those into a Q&A document that we will post along with part 8 at this link within just about a week. Okay, it looks like the questions have slowed down, so I want to thank everyone for being here today. We will be doing another webinar in 2 weeks, and that one is listed in our scheduled webinars. Part 9, sorry, is going to be on drainage modeling, SUDA, and GINT. That will be on December 4th. On December 18th, we will have part 10, 3D modeling, and signing and sealing of models. Thanks again for joining us today. I'm going to go ahead and end the webinar now. It looks like everyone got their questions in. We'll go ahead and mull over those questions and get you a question and answer dialogue. I say question answer dialogue so many times. Question answer document that we will put on the website. Thanks again.